Welcome back everyone to my channel. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. Happy August long weekend to those of you who celebrate in Canada. It is that weekend in August for us in Saskatchewan, so enjoy the next few days and some time away with your family. Anyway, going into a nice little puddle pour here with 4 colors. I've got the soft-bodied Liquitex Gold, Silver, Amsterdam Copper, and some Blue Flash by Folk Art, which turns out really pretty cool. Okay, now as I go into these puddles, I decided to try and keep them as far apart initially off the beginning as I could, just to maintain some distance between each color one at a time. So silver away from copper, copper away from silver for now. Appreciating I have 4 colors, not 3, like my last puddle pour, so I needed more space in between, and I had a hard time deciding initially before that first little pour here where to put this Blue Flash, because I needed it as an accent color for my color combination. It turns out that mixing silver, copper, gold, and blue didn't look really super stellar on my table when I went to go make my pour. So I was very strategic with where my puddles went, and initially on the first few pours, or puddles, sorry, I wanted to be very intentional with where those puddles were going. And as an observation, I have found that in the last little while I've used these soft-bodied acrylics by Liquitex, which are very, very smooth. If you haven't had a chance to use them, I would recommend picking up a tube or two just to try for a bit of a sample or experiment for yourself, because again, they're quite fluid. You don't need a lot of paint for how much volume you can create. I think I had about 1 ounce or 30 grams of paint and approximately 90 ounces of total pouring medium, which includes my 50% Floetrol and 50% Artist Loft pouring medium as my concoction for my pours. So I found that it mixes quite nice and very smooth, and is really quite a nice paint to try out. Now, looking down on this video at these puddles, it may appear based on the color pattern that there was no rhyme or reason to what I was doing in terms of where the puddles were. I promise you there was, because my intent was again to have the blue or the Blue Flash as an accent, and the silver be kind of a primary color for swiping through, and the golds and coppers being an additional color for the sake of the 3rd and 4th color being, again, a bit more complementary. And with the metallics, don't ever forget, if you can manage, to pop your bubbles. I mixed these paints the evening before, but there were still a lot of bubbles in that copper. So be sure to grab a torch or heat source and pop your bubbles. Alright, time to break up my puddle patterns as best I can. So in the past little while, I've found that I have made the best designs, or broken up my colors in a really particular way by going through them one at a time in a circular motion back and forth until I'm all done across the board. I'm really just trying to drag silver into copper, copper into blue, blue into silver. You kind of get the picture. But I found that in this, back of my paintbrush technique works well for me. You may use a skewer, you may use a toothpick, you may use your finger, whatever works best for you. Keep doing that, but I find that the back of the paintbrush for me works really, really well because it doesn't dig into the canvas itself. It is rounded, which is a positive, and again, no worries about getting a big mess on my canvas until we are through the color. Alright, and as for my extra paint, I was happy with my design of what I kind of accomplished with my puddles plus my broken up parts with the back of my paintbrush. And I had mixed about 20 total ounces of paint, and I had some extra copper, gold, silver, and some flash as well. So I wanted to just pour this on the outside of the puddles to ensure that the puddles didn't stretch out in a weird way or causing some lacing to break up because my paints were pulling too hard on each other. So this is more of a way to just make sure your design in the middle stretches the way you want it to, versus breaking or kind of getting stuck on the canvas and pulling away from what you want to accomplish. So this is paint you're really just not caring for and expect to fall off anyhow, so that is why my extra works out great this time around leading into my swipes. I did 3 swipes, which I was really happy with. There are just 3, simple, back and forth, and made some very pretty lacing. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to use the silver as a bit of a primary color to swipe through, and I used the flash the second time, and a bit of a shorter, we'll call it lane of lacing for this pattern, and going through more copper to get a bit of contrast going through the middle of the painting. And on my last one, about the same size as the second, going into the last third of the painting, again making a pretty design. And I was quite happy with how these colors kind of turned out in terms of the swipe. Alright, and going into my tilts for my 4 corners. Now I find that in using these soft bodied acrylics, because they are so much more fluid than I have been using in the past, like, and when I say more fluid, we are 50–60% more fluid than previous paints, so they're quite liquid. And I've got to be careful with all this nice lacing not to pull things apart too far. So the intent here was to go slow, just take your time, kind of go back and forth, side to side, as slow as you need to, because really there's no need to rush with any kind of, we're not racing. I'm actually tilting off the top left side as we look down on it. In a bit of a weird way, the angle's kind of goofy with my camera, but I'm going very slow and meticulous through that corner, and then leading the paint back into the center before I keep going on the opposite corner. And as I'm beginning to adopt a bit of a more fluid paint style, we'll call it, I have gone from a very thick paint when I was still learning forever ago, and moving into a bit of a more thin experiment for the time being. Do you prefer a thicker paint when you pour, or a thinner paint? Do you mix with pouring medium or just with water? What are your concoctions and what are your combinations you enjoy using? And what do you think works best for you compared to what I do and share on my channel week to week? Let me know in the comments below. We can have a quick discussion over who thinks whose technique is best. Now, looking down on the composition of this painting, I was pretty happy with how things were turning out. My lacing was holding tight, which was great. Nothing was pulling apart very far, which was even better. And in terms of the color pattern, I mentioned before earlier on that I wanted to have the blues be kind of an accent to the silvers, which I think is turning out. And also keeping in mind that the blue flash is a color shifting color. One way in the color or the sunlight, it turns out to be blue or purple, depending which side you're looking at. Now here, I was in a spot where I was tilting my last corner, and I was really running out of paint, so I'm glad I had the extra, 5 ounces to pour in the edges and a bit more silver to finish off that corner. Anyhow, the total package here was quite pretty, and it reminded me a bit of a very soft sunset in terms of like an oceanic vibe. So what do you guys think in terms of color palette? How did I do? And as I pull that final corner back into the middle for the final placement, I was really happy with how these colors turned out. I really wasn't sure initially how they may all come together, but I was quite pleased with the overall outcome of this painting. And as we go in for a bit of an overhead look at the finished product, again, the lacing was very pretty. The soft-bodied acrylic by Liquitex really tends to hold its shapes and patterns depending on what you're doing. For swipes, my lacing is maintained its crispness, and the overall look and feel of the painting kind of stays within what I was going for. So again, a bit of a close-up on that silver lacing, which looks really, really pretty, and some softer colors with the color, the folk art color shift, as well as that copper by Amsterdam. So let me know below in the comments section what you think on this painting, and we will catch you again in the next one.